Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to a special Wednesday matinee edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular, of course.
Hello.
How's everybody doing today? We are on YouTube and Rumble today, multi-streaming for very good reason. We're going to waste no time introducing our guest of the day. She is a journalist at The Gray Zone and an author whose new book is Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire. You all know who she is, but if you don't, this will be a good introduction. Anya Parampil. Anya, great to see you.
My pleasure to be here. Nice to see you guys.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Absolutely. Yes. So you had a book launch last week where Russell met you. So congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
We also established that the Gray Zone may be full of Presbyterians because no one could answer the Katz's Deli question.
I at least said whitefish.
She did say whitefish.
Okay, well, whitefish, I mean, that's good. You can't get better than whitefish.
And
that
thank
makes
you,
up
Russell,
for the fact that Max doesn't eat. Yeah. Because Max said he doesn't eat pastrami. The fact that you eat whitefish, that certainly makes up for it. I mean, whitefish, that is the top of the Jew food pyramid there. I mean, you eat that, you're good.
I saved Aaron and Max.
Yes.
She did. Yes. She saved the honor of the Gray Zone. She actually single-handedly stopped me from starting the hashtag Gray Zone So Presbyterian.
Whitefish, that's like the ace of spades of Jewish food. That's pulling
she
the Joker out of the bottom of the deck. Yeah, absolutely.
Although Max, he did name drop B&H for Blintz's, so can't really argue with that.
He mentioned Veselka. Is that in the Village?
Veselka, yeah, and he trashed Veselka for driving his ancestors out of Europe because they're Ukrainian.
My dad's cousin used to like. I'm pretty sure that's the name of the place. But anyway,
yeah. So I used to go there a lot. Actually, one of the few places in the city with good corned beef hash.
Okay, all right. I think I know the place. I don't know it by name, but I'm pretty sure I got a good image of it.
That's the little Ukraine area there.
Yeah. It's like the little very bare bones sort of like diner type place. Yeah, I know what place it is. Yeah,
so it's very Ukraine now.
Yeah.
Is it? Are they still there? I was wondering that.
I don't mean that specific location. I just mean that neighborhood.
No, is it still Ukrainian?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I haven't hung around there in a while. I used to live pretty close to there back in the day. So it's going to be the show, Anya. We're gonna go over menu items, great menu items of New York restaurants.
Top 10 restaurants to read Anya's book.
Yes. So speaking of which, you can see it behind me, Corporate Coup here.
Oh, let's hold that a little closer. Because I knew you had it.
And so far, I am really enjoying it. Not only is it very informative, and like a lot of people who came out of the Bernie Sanders left, frankly, I need to be informed. Very often we share the deficit of Bernie Sanders of not being as informed in foreign policy as we should be. So not only is this informative, but it's actually a very good read. A lot of times these kinds of things can be very academic. They're very dry. I'm sitting there like a Stephen King novel. I'm like, so what happens next? What happens next to the Venezuelans? Does the clown come out of the sewer? So it's very good. So first question, and this struck me, right? You really opened with this. So you describe Caracas as this kind of bustling metropolis where nobody's fighting for toilet paper or canned goods, very unlike the impression that we get in the Western media. So what would you say about the state of Venezuela today? Is it very much at odds with what we see in the media? Is it just a normal country? Is it prosperous? How would you describe it?
Well, just as a disclaimer, it has been since before I had my daughter. So it's been over 3 years since I have traveled to Venezuela, but I saw it a lot between the years 2019 and 2021. And at that time, from what I understand, the economy was weaker than it is now. And at the time that I knew it, it was improving from its lowest point. Its lowest point, as I document in the book, was 2015, 2016, 2017, when the Obama administration really launched the hybrid economic war against Venezuela, targeting it as a national security threat or classifying it as such according to U.S. law, and issuing a round of sanctions that had the effect of crushing the commodities market in Venezuela, because something I explained in the book is that ever since the 1920s, when oil was discovered in Venezuela, the country was forcibly, from foreign powers, kept as this kind of petrostate. And then that makes sense, because if there's so much wealth that can be made out of one industry in a country like Venezuela, it has the most crude oil out of any country in the world by far, even like over double what Saudi Arabia has.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that World War II, the Allied victory was largely fueled with Venezuelan oil. You said 80% of oil going to England was coming out of Venezuela?
Exactly. So the UK was entirely dependent on oil exports during World War II. And by the time the US entered the war, 80% of UK oil imports were coming from Venezuela. And that was because of a classic colonial imperial kind of relationship the US and Britain maintained with Venezuela. Total control, US companies mainly, control over its domestic oil industry. And so that created a state that was very dependent on oil money. And because as long as they gave the oil at the price Britain and the international powers wanted to the international market, they would in exchange get all the goods that we produce all around the world: toilet paper, baby food, formula, and be able to import that as a sort of exchange. And so Venezuela didn't have the chance to develop its own domestic capacity to produce a lot of these goods over those decades. And that is something that predated Chavez's rise to power in Venezuela. But then in 2015, 2016, when these sanctions come down, that's when Venezuela really starts to feel the effect of the sanctions and the fact that they were so dependent on the international economy to import basic goods for all that time. That's when we see these shortages, these lines, a lot of images of empty supermarket shelves that people might remember. And of course, the Western media simply printed these images and said it was the fault of communism or socialism, not acknowledging that the vast majority of Venezuela's economy is still run by private corporations. I mean, people should understand these supermarkets are not run by the government. Hotels, restaurants, anything, it's shopping malls, clothing stores. When you visit those types of businesses in Venezuela, they're not state owned. They're operated by the private sector. And so the private sector was cut off from capital and from basic goods as a result of these sanctions. Western media gets to pump it out and blame socialism. And then ultimately the US's goal was to collapse the government just by creating that level of unrest. Venezuela intervened in the crisis, as I document in the book. We can talk about the CLAP program, through this government program where they actually delivered basic supplies, goods to people, millions of Venezuelan households on a monthly basis, virtually free of charge. And they were able to do that by crafting these alliances with countries such as Turkey and China that could supply them with capital, but also goods like pasta and flour. that
Right.
they put in these clap boxes. And so that was a remedy to the situation. And then ultimately, since Venezuela's made some adjustments to its currency and just domestic financial policy over the last few years, Venezuela's economy and the situation there has improved. Their goods are back on the shelves. Things are back to some sort of relative normal. But from when I speak to people now, what I hear is that the problem is just, as we're experiencing in the U.S., inflation has gone down a lot in Venezuela, I should say. Like, there was the time of hyperinflation that was crazy, but it is still difficult to afford goods. I mean, but that's just something I think we're experiencing everywhere, all around the world at this point. But I'll hopefully be able to give a better, more complete update on Venezuela today by the end of the year, because I plan on visiting in the next several months.
Well, you talked a little bit about the Venezuelan model there. You made the point, obviously, that most businesses remain private there. So when, Western leaders demagogue about Venezuelan socialism, what are they talking about? Are they talking more about nationalization of resources?
Yes. And of course, this is the most threatening aspect of Venezuelan socialism, is the fact that one of the first acts the government under Chavez took was to nationalize the natural wealth. Any of the resources under the continental shelf, it's in their constitution, is owned by the people, and any wealth procured from that natural wealth or resource that exists, it's not just oil, by the way. There's gold. Venezuela has the largest untapped gold deposits in the world, scrap iron, minerals, all of these raw materials really that are needed on the international market. Venezuela is super well endowed with these resources. And so it's in the constitution that these goods belong to the people. The wealth cannot be transferred to a foreign entity, meaning a foreign corporation or a foreign government. And that upended the relationship that the transatlantic powers had with Venezuela all throughout the last century, ever since oil was discovered there. And so this is the evil socialism that Bolton and Elliot Abrams are concerned about. It's simply a question of who controls the oil and the natural wealth, because we would like our banks and our corporations to get our hands on all of that. And they stated that openly. Bolton said, we would really, our American companies stand by ready to exploit Venezuelan oil if there's a change in government. So that was something that was really interesting about the Trump administration and Bolton's existence within it, is that it really ripped the mask off of U.S. Venezuela policy in many ways, and made it very clear that this was about simply wealth, not a question of democracy or human rights or big abstractions.
A lot of people cast Trump as this enemy of the deep state, this fighter against the deep state. And yet he tried to stage this coup with Juan Guaido, who you mentioned 81% of Venezuelans had never heard of, install him as president. Can you explain what went down there and why it wasn't successful?
Yeah, as I say in the book, yes, Trump got elected for taking an anti-interventionist line and speaking out against U.S. Disastrous regime change policy that had occurred in the past. And unfortunately, Latin America was a major blind spot for him once he came into the White House. And that, I feel, is simply because of geography and the outsized influence that the reactionary Venezuelan and Cuban lobby in Miami play in U.S. politics. It's similar to the Israeli lobby, not as powerful and not anywhere near as powerful, but in many ways an extension. And this group has power in Florida. They have electoral power and they have power in our government. And so they're an actual base that Trump needs to play to politically, regardless of his own views. And he definitely outsourced his Latin America policy to hawks when it came to Latin America. I mean, John Bolton writes about in his own memoir, and a lot of my book was based on synthesizing my own experience and reporting with what I read in the memoirs of John Bolton and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo or Defense Secretary Mark Esper. And Bolton writes about how he selected Mauricio Claver Carron, who is a super fanatical Cuban American and Bolton tapped him to serve as his under national security advisor for the Western Hemisphere. And the two of them really, through their connections in the opposition lobby or the opposition Venezuelan lobby, crafted this proposal to recognize Guaido as president of Venezuela. And Bolton writes that Trump didn't initially want to put his name on the U.S. government document that recognized Guaido. And that the only reason Trump ultimately agreed to do that was because Mike Pence, the vice president, held a phone conversation with Guaido the night before his self-directed swearing-in ceremony and was really reassured in Guaido's capabilities and that he convinced the president to take this decision. And Bolton writes again in his memoir that he was present for that phone call between Pence and Guaido. So Bolton is nudging this along the whole way, this boneheaded policy. And eventually, as I write in the book, Trump became frustrated with he was told that you recognize this guy and Venezuela falls and changes overnight. And when that didn't happen, and the longer it went on, became clear that Maduro was actually very much in control of the country, Trump actually would ask his team why he couldn't meet Maduro and try to solve U.S.-Venezuela problems between our two countries directly with the government. And that Bolton writes proudly about preventing that. And Pompeo also ideologically working to prevent that. And of course, that's not an excuse. Trump, I choose to view him as a complex figure that is up against many moving parts of the administration and the government that I don't even think I have a full grasp of how it really operates. All I know is that the president is not truly the commander-in-chief or the chief diplomat of the United States. There is a permanent state that directs policy. And when it comes to Latin America and to Venezuela specifically, it was clear that there was a bipartisan agenda to drive out Maduro's government. And ultimately, the greatest irony is that Trump's extremist policy and Bolton's, Elliott Abrams, their existence and this coup attempt that they led was the greatest gift the United States could have ever handed Maduro's government. It made Maduro's government stronger than ever, and it crushed the opposition inside Venezuela because this radical opposition no longer could go out into the streets and cause chaos and try to overthrow the government by force, because they were up against this false narrative that their guy was already president. And even though he wasn't, if they were to go out in the street and have these big protests against Maduro, well, then they kind of look like idiots because they're saying President Guaido, President Guaido. So it killed that radical U.S. opposition and their strategy domestically. It made Maduro's government, again, stronger than ever. Really, it showed that, we're not just lying when we say we're under attack from the United States. Now they've openly declared this coup policy and it's naked. So it's time to double down and really, defend your sovereignty as a Venezuelan, regardless of whether or not you're a fan of Maduro. And so that it had the effect of that. And then it also ultimately led to the corporate coup aspect, which was regardless of what happened on the ground in Venezuela, the U.S. and its allies, the transatlantic financial behemoth of the West, was able to loot billions of dollars worth of Venezuelan wealth, whether in the form of gold bullion that's currently still sitting in the Bank of England, where even though the Venezuelan government has asked to repatriate that gold, they've denied it for years because of this coup policy, or in the United States, where as a result of the recognition of Guaido, U.S. institutions went ahead and seized Venezuelan bank accounts or oil pipelines even belonging to Citgo Petroleum, and courts have become involved in really taking apart these accounts and assets that belong to the Venezuelan government, and now distributing them among a handful of vultures that have been lurking in the corners. So the policy itself didn't succeed on the ground, and there's an irony to it because it backfired in a major way. but it did succeed in another realm, which is a realm that we often don't really see or talk about because finance is obscure and shadowy.
So that's interesting. I mean, going back to what you said about Trump there, that he was asking why he couldn't meet with Maduro and Bolton had to kind of twist his arm because, it comes up a lot in our space, this question of what threat, if any, does Trump actually pose to the deep state, right, broadly speaking? Because they certainly talk about him as if he's a threat to them. Like, they certainly don't want him around. That seems obvious. Yet, on the other hand, you can point to an example like this where he comes off looking like a big fake. But I guess what you're kind of saying is that it's more nuanced than that. Is their problem with Trump that he's high maintenance? That's what it sounds like you're saying. Like, basically, yeah, like they have to hold his hand through episodes like this. They can't count on him to do what they want without their guidance. And so he's a big pain in the ass.
I think in this case, he was led in a bad direction. And then once you make the decision to recognize Guaido, it's kind of, then you had to double down and more extremely on that policy because it was such a big risk to take that and now as the U.S. has failed, it looks ridiculous. So I think it was probably one of the worst foreign policy blunders of his presidency, along with killing Qasem Soleimani, I would say. And I do think, just from my experience covering Trump and his attempts at detente, to have warm relations with Russia or North Korea, I think especially Russia was such a red line that he was crossing and attempting there, that there was little room for progress on other fronts. And that's unfortunate because something that I'm trying to bring out in this book is for Americans to understand that we can't separate these countries. Of course we can, because we should understand them as sovereign countries and try to learn about what it is that they bring to the table or their histories as individual nations. But you cannot separate Venezuela from Russia. These countries now are inextricably linked, just like Iran and China are, even Turkey to a degree within that bloc, and India. So these countries are very powerful today. And Russia, you can't pursue good relations with Russia and warm, friendly relations with Russia while trying to stoke a Cold War with China or overthrow the government of Venezuela, because Russia will never trust you. They don't appreciate, it's not like they see the sovereignty of Venezuela and China and other countries as totally separate from theirs. If the U.S. is working to undermine their allies, then we cannot be trusted as an ally from the Russian perspective. And, so it's very infantile, I think, for someone like Trump or his team to come in and think that they can pursue a path to peace with Moscow, but then treat these other they're going to be powerful countries. They're rich. They have rich histories, and we should deal with them based in reality, not in some past where we thought, they would never develop after a certain point and we could just keep them under this boot forever. No, this is the 21st century. We're a quarter of a way through it. It's not going to work like the way things did in the last 100 years.
Well, one of the most striking images in the book to me, in keeping with that, is in America, obviously, a lot of our history in Latin America is hidden from the public. You describe a sculpture in the Venezuelan foreign ministry of Allende's shattered glasses from after his assassination. And as an American reading that, I just thought, wow, what a perspective they have on us in Latin America, that you would walk into the foreign ministry and see this monument to American coups in Latin America. Is that how Latin America sees us in general?
They see it as their own history. Yes, they see it as, this is what we are up against if we don't defend our sovereignty and yes, our own country and our own politics. And I'm speaking from the perspective of some of the Venezuelans I know may be imperfect. We may be able to improve, but the main fight right now that they have to focus on every day is just for survival. Because yes, that threat of violence and coup and terror that befell Chile in 1979 has been happening still throughout Latin America over the last 10 years, or 20 years. Honduras, Bolivia, these other countries that have fallen in similar ways. Ecuador, also lawfare becoming a major weapon. So the war has become sophisticated and hybrid. It's not the traditional military coup that we saw depose of Allende. But yes, this threat and this reality is very real to the Venezuelans, to the Venezuelan government officials who go to work in the foreign ministry every day. And that monument really demonstrates that this isn't a game to them. And there's no room really to stand back and to catch your breath, even, because the empire moves swiftly. And so I'm trying to bring that message to Americans so that we can start to reflect on ourselves and think about what we could do better, because I still do think we could do better. It's up to us to change. If we changed, I think the rest of the world would still want to interact with us, have a relationship with us. And that includes Venezuela. We would be sister countries, having great relations, best friends. We have such a common shared history that the only thing stopping an amazing existence between the U.S. and Venezuela are ideologues in Washington, D.C. It's not the crazy communists in Caracas. No, they're far more pragmatic than whatever you want to call, whatever ideology you want to give the people working in the Justice Department and Treasury Department here. So, and the State Department. So if we got rid of those people in Washington, I believe that things could be great.
Well, that brings up a really interesting point, because I watched your book launch, and you seem to take a sort of anti-accelerationist stance, if you will. It's very common in our space to basically, if we're being honest here, kind of relish in the demise of the U.S. as the main imperial power, which I certainly do. But then that brings up the question, okay, so what happens to us inside the empire? I get this question a lot as a parent. I'm sure you, as a relatively new parent, get this all the time. Well, why would you have kids if you think that the country's going to hell, you know? And one response is, look, people in Gaza have kids. Like, yeah, I'm bringing kids into the world where eggs are $7 for a package. Like, there are worse environments in which to have children than the one I did, and you, I guess you have a young child too. But it is an interesting question that I get a lot for that reason. But you seem to think that the United States can sort of still prosper in a multipolar world. And that's kind of hopeful to hear, because I think of the United States as sort of like, I said this on the last show, season 6 Tony Soprano mode, where all pretense of morality and dignity and honor just out the window. We're just this big gluttonous fat thing that's about to destroy itself. Exactly. And so how do you see the United States functioning, integrating into a multipolar world, and still prospering here? Because I think that is really missing from the discourse in our camp. Like, it's one thing to see the empire crumble and take some pleasure in that, as I no doubt do. But it's another question, okay, so then what are we doing to make things better? What does that even look like?
It's such a big question, but I think it's so interesting and important to ask that right now, because we are living through the change. We are living through an evolution in the way the world works and the way that we relate to each other. And yes, the United States, I believe, unless we go through some terrible civil war and break up into various regions, as long as we remain the United States as we currently exist today, which I would like us to do, I do, of course, believe that we will be a prosperous and influential country in this new world, because it's simple math and geography. Look at a map of the world. The United States is huge. We have tons of natural resources. We have tons of human potential. So much that, I mean, we have been taught to hate ourselves, and, you know, for legitimate reason, we have sort of shame about being the United States, that we forget all of the good things that we have brought to the table as humans and throughout history, including, I think, our Constitution, if we return to it, is actually an incredible document, what we brought in terms of human rights and what the state can be, what it should exist to protect the rights of individuals. If we returned to that, I think things could be great. But yes, if we got away from zero-sum interventionist ideological politics when it comes to international relations, we accept that our banks, and by the way, a lot of it has to do with just restructuring our relationship to the banks and industry in our own country, because those are the people driving this policy, right? It's not the American people. It's not even the American government. The American government is just an extension of this international, it's really a transatlantic financial empire. The industry, everything is secondary to that. It's controlled by finance. So if we started to think about and how we relate to our own economy differently and tamp down the power. I mean, that was Bernie's message, right? We need to break up the banks. We need to break up the corporations. I think we should look to Venezuela for the model of not socializing necessarily the entire economy all at once, because that hasn't really worked throughout history, but nationalizing natural resources in the United States. I think we're ready for that conversation. Alaska does it. Alaskan residents get a check every month based on the amount of oil that their state oil company sells. Why isn't the rest of the United States on that model? Why aren't we talking to native tribes if they would like to, there's all these tension between Washington and corporations and native tribes over exploiting resources. Well, what if the tribes had a stake in it and wanted to do it themselves instead of, outside government coming in? And nobody trusts, some worker in Washington coming to mess up their ecosystem because no one believes that they'll actually work to protect it. But if people and communities that, might have natural gas or different resources actually had a stake in those, in that wealth, then I think things would start to change. And if we were, really restructure ourselves as a country in that way and started to look at the rest of the world instead of just a bunch of enemies everywhere as countries that we could relate with and exchange with, really just on the basic principles of common interests and, what do you need? What do I have? How can we work together? Like, that's where the rest of the world is going. They're going beyond ideology. That's why Iran and Saudi Arabia and India and Pakistan can be part of all of these international or regional groups that, we thought, oh no, they would never get along and agree to be in the same block. No, they will, because they all want to survive and they want to preserve their character and their sovereignty. So we have to do that. We as Americans have to reassert our sovereignty first and foremost over our country, because we do not have it right now. And then once we get that, I think a lot of our other problems are solved. If we get this class of financial and industrial oligarchs out of the way, get them out of, controlling every aspect of our government, which I understand is a big task. But, we're going to be up against a lot in the next few months and years as this global economy changes. So I think people who have more creative visions for the future and what this country can be are actually going to have a bigger role to play and have a bigger voice, because, de-dollarization, we're already feeling the effects of that here, whether we like it or not. That's driving some of this inflation. And as the world moves away from our centralized Western controlled economy, we're going to start to feel the repercussions here more, and we're going to have to confront reality. And so it's scary, but at the same time, I'm excited about it because I do believe the solutions are there. And that yes, if we keep in mind that we will always be a powerful country, we will always succeed. We can live nice lives here. I mean, I don't know about the United Kingdom. I always joke that they might have to work that out between. I think they're the ones benefiting from this relationship at this point, really, the Europeans. The Americans, we're just getting sucked dry with our tax dollars. And
do you mean because of the military support we give Europe?
Yes. Well, that's exactly, yes. That's, if it weren't for that block and the way that NATO is arranged, Europe wouldn't be able to have all of that socialism that they're so proud of. We are subsidizing it. And right. I mean, that just makes me so upset, especially because Europeans are so stuck up about it. They love to look down on Americans and be like, oh, you don't have this here. I had free this. I had free that over here. Well, who's paying for your military? Because if you want to mock me, then maybe stop accepting my military support. And how do you think those countries would look then?
So it would really be fair for us to title this segment, Anya Says Fuck Europe.
Yeah, well, screw NATO. No, Europe. Europe. I love the European people too. Some of them, not so much their elite. Their elite class, I do think, is pretty much the most vile class element on the planet. And where they have extended throughout the world, including Venezuela, those are the worst people. They're the Israelis as well. It all comes back to that class of European elite, and they need to have a reckoning. They've been treating the rest of us like a host, and they act like parasites. So I'm over that. I think everybody's over that at this point.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting answer. So to get as specific as possible, because I think sometimes the smaller the question, the harder it is, right? I mean, it's a cliche because it's true. Like the first step is the hardest step, and you touched on it there. So do you think, in terms of causes to get behind, to really get that ball rolling? Because I feel like as a left in this space, we tend to talk about big ideas, macro theories, but okay, if we're going to try to orient this country in such a way whereas we can survive the end of the empire, survive and make as smooth a transition into this new multipolar world as possible, it sounds to me like you're saying collectivization of resources is a good place to start, just as an issue. Like as a step, is okay, what's the first step we take towards doing this?
Yeah, I think that it is all about framing too in the United States. I think we need to, in 2024, get past only speaking in the terms of books and ideology from the past century.
Yep.
And so instead of going to the U.S. public and say that we need to bring socialism to it, because what does that mean in 2024? I honestly don't know. I think we just speak about the ideas. We say, look, nobody likes the big oil companies and the big banks. Nobody does. That's why Bernie had this cross appeal. I think he got too caught up in left ideology and politics, and that limited him. Whereas if someone just said, forget about parties, Democrat and Republican, forget about ideology, we're just talking about who owns the resources under our feet. Because if you're a libertarian and you're a socialist, you might actually have a similar view on that question.
Right.
It's all about framing. And if we just get into the framing of soak the fat, I mean, I have a book over there about Huey Long, a great populist politician out of Louisiana at the beginning of the last century. And his slogan, I think, was something along the lines of like, soak the fat cats and every man can be a king. Everybody knows that there is this small group of people at the top that have been manipulating every aspect of our lives and siphoning off the wealth. And nobody, average people, I think, whether they identify as through one party or with one candidate, Trump, Bernie, or the other, they see through that at this point. And if someone were just talking to them about their needs and proposing, restructuring the banks or money is another big question. The Federal Reserve, you have people on Congress like Thomas Massie introducing legislation to end the Fed. I think that's all part of the direction that we need to go in order to survive in this new world. Because obviously printing money and then taking it back from everybody through taxes forever just isn't going to work.
Well, when you talk about these labels of left and right, Russ has a video that he wants to show. Russ, do you want to touch on that now? I think that'd be a good time.
Yeah. It was very interesting. You made a point of saying these descriptions of left and right should not be misinterpreted as meaning what they mean in America. And you say right in the Latin American context essentially means aligning with U.S. policy and its executors, whereas left is being resistant to that policy. But you also talk about how Hugo Chavez described his policies as very Christian. And I think in America, because starting in the 60s, you had this new left really pushed a kind of cultural liberalism as the definition of leftism, so that even people who may be focused on economics usually don't question that fusion. There are people who are at different places on that spectrum. But I have a clip here of Nicolas Maduro, actually, the current leader of Venezuela, and Chavez's handpicked successor, speaking on this. And I think it's something a lot of people on the left in the West just don't even have a concept of. So let's take a look.
Hegemónico, imperial, bélico, que además, como está en decadencia, se pone sumamente violento, es que la decisión que tenemos que tomar hoy no es por gusto.
Y con una cultura totalmente decadente.
Y eso
de
se
la
nota en el arte.
pornografía,
Sí.
de la drogadicción,
Sí, el fentanilo.
autodestructiva y de muchas otras cosas.
Claro.
De la disolución del núcleo familiar,
Sí.
de la disolución social.
Ajá.
¿Ves? Son una cantidad de cosas que uno ve y dice, ese mundo de ustedes no lo queremos. Autodestrucción, destrucción de la familia, los valores de la familia, los valores del amor, los valores de las ganas de vivir, del derecho a la vida. Ellos son la alternativa. Ellos,
Claro.
ese imperio colectivo del norte, como le dicen por allá, es la alternativa, hoy más que nunca, ¿o no?
No, jamás.
Entonces Rosa Luxemburgo vuelve a venir a decirnos lo que tú acabas de decir, Diego. Socialismo o barbarie.
Exactamente.
Humanidad o muerte, pudiéramos decir.
Tal
Okay, now that is a kind of leftism that really post 60s, I think most people have just even forgotten the idea of a socialist economics being joined to family values. I was at the Dissident Dialogues a couple of weeks ago, and the only person there who had anything to say about economics was a Catholic conservative from Compact Magazine, who expressed very much the same views. He felt economic policy has to create the conditions for family life.
Yes.
Now, family values is something that here the left almost by definition for 2 generations has branded as right-wing and Christian,
Yes.
and thereby suspect.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought this up because I had to deprogram myself from a lot of this. Just coming in as from a liberal city, in the 90s, early 2000s. I grew up mostly in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Like I said, very progressive, just accepted a lot of mainstream liberal new left thinking. And just through my own experience, having a long-term relationship, having a family relatively young for women my age, I realized that a lot of what I thought was true about, especially, women or the family, and what was considered social conservatism, actually, some of it made sense. Just what I thought was just crazy, bad right-wing thinking that I could never talk. Like if you took that clip of Maduro and played the beginning of it to a campus leftist, they would have like a mental breakdown because all of that is evil to them. But in reality, you're not going to win with human beings if you if you don't realize that, like, yes, biology and just human family nature is at the end of the day what most people want. Most people are not getting up every day to fight for socialism. They want to fight for their family and just day-to-day survival. And so that's what the message should be about. And it should be pro-family, and it should be security. What he said is so true about self-destruction being a major aspect of our current society. It goes hand in hand with the destruction of the family, because people don't realize that if they're told and they should be cut off from family, or like not want to settle down and just, go sow your wild oats forever, which was so ingrained with us in our minds through media and culture all these years, that eventually that kind of breaks you down. And then you can't just like jump at a certain and change timelines and be like, okay, now I'm gonna settle down and make my family. It creates this whole host of other problems and toxicity for people. And I'm not advocating some like straight edge, lifestyle here. It's just because you brought up this question, and it is something that I've been thinking about myself, deprogramming a lot of the assumptions that I made about the relationship that the politics of family value should have to a left wing. Or that's why, again, these labels don't work anymore. I don't know what left wing, left wing ideology here is not what Maduro described there, right? Like talking about the family and all that. So I don't even know what to describe or identify as left wing in the United States anymore. But to revive that message here and bring that back into the conversation, I think that's how we start to win people again and I feel more hope that we could come out of this if we start centering that kind of message, pro-family message, and tie it to these progressive economic policies, like you say, to not separate the two. Somewhere along the way, leftism or all of that progressivism became all about culture, and obviously it had a really negative impact. Everybody's miserable too in the left scene, you notice, and I think this has a lot to do with it.
Oh, absolutely,
And Maduro, in that same interview, doubled down on the vision of Christian values playing a role in the Venezuelan vision of the state. So everything he said there, I think, lines up with that and with what Chavez himself described as a socialist and Christian project.
Yeah, I co-sign every single thing you said. I've thought about taking a stab at a book on family values for the left, because I've always considered myself a very left-wing guy. But I live a very socially conservative life. My wife and I have been together almost 14 years. Before that, my first girlfriend and I dated for like 6 years. So I've been in like a monogamous relationship almost my entire adult life, literally. So, and the way I describe
and that would be rare for your age.
Extremely rare for my age, but I don't consider myself to be socially conservative. I think a good way to frame it, there's this politician in Germany, her name is Sarah Wagenknecht. I don't know if you've heard of her, you probably have. I know Greenwald interviewed her a while back, and she talked about cultural conservatism. So you can like practice a culturally conservative lifestyle, as I do, but still not be socially conservative to the extent you want to impose that by force on other people.
Exactly.
And that, I think, is a perfect way to frame it. Like, yes, promote the family, make family life easier, incentivize family life. Sure. Don't force it on people. Don't coerce people into it. But, child tax credits are a good thing. Universal pre-K is a good thing. These are all really good things. A family is an economic engine on a superhighway. And they exist to provide economic security. And I think a left that seeks to prop that up is going to be far more successful than a left that is seen as trying to tear that down or trying to undermine it. Yeah.
And it used to be the case that anything that you just described, right wingers would like, again, their sensors would go off like, no, never, this is socialism. But I think in 2024, if we get past the labels, there are people who want that now too on what is considered the right in the United States. I know these people, like I talk to them, and I think that's most people are actually fall somewhere in that category, either left or right, but want some sort of family tax credits I've seen people on the right praising Hungary for, I think it's if you have like 3 kids, you never have to pay taxes again. Think policies like that.
Yeah. They just
when you start incentivizing families and building,
and it goes down progressively, right?
Oh, okay.
Each kid,
I think if you introduce those kinds of policies and have a progressive economic policy in line with the pro-family, socially positive, social and cultural like policy, then you won't see as many people dying on the streets, like, and being so depressed and just in a hole. And it is a cultural thing too. I think so much of our media is focused on making us accept certain evils of our society and making us feel trapped inside them. It's kind of building the matrix around us, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, Catherine Liu in Virtue Hoarders, she put forth what I think was a pretty good explanation for why this kind of liberalism has taken over the West, because it's a very consumerist vision. It's very friendly to capitalism to make everyone childless, isolated, and only expressing themselves not through family, but through lifestyle brand consumerist virtue signaling. Right. So naturally, a real socialism would probably look askance at that idea of what the aim of life is, really.
Yeah, it's weird that so much socialist and communist ideology in communities here in the left or in the U.S. are so like it embraces all of the negative aspects of imperialism that Maduro was just criticizing there. That's like actually the center organizing base for a lot of it now. It's like I see all these communist groups that have meetings about like trans liberation.
Yes, right.
And well, that's the meme of like the leftist with blue hair on an Apple laptop in a Starbucks, right?
Yeah,
and
it's real.
that's exactly the archetype. Like that is the meme, and it's like that for a reason. I mean, that is set up by design. Like the only left that's really possible under neoliberalism is a left that embraces the politics of self-expression. That's all it is. It's a politics of virtue signaling who you are and who you want to be and how you think you ought to live your life. But there's no collective effort involved in actually upending the system that literally lured you into a Starbucks where you plotted your social revolution on your $1,500 MacBook. Yeah. Like that, it's amazing that it doesn't register to them. But to shift gears to, and I know we don't have much time left, so we won't have to go all the way down this. I think the campus protests now surrounding Israel-Gaza may have triggered a sort of light bulb moment in a lot of these kids, because now they're seeing the way the system actually does come together and crack down on them when you actually threaten them in a real way.
Yeah, I agree. And I just on the point of you saying that there's no actual collective movement from these groups, that it's all about virtue signaling on their computer. It's because when you get them talking, a lot of the times they hate average Americans. That's what I mean. They believe in accelerationism to the point that, like, it's like, do you know where you live? Does your family live here too? Like, what do you want to have happen to people? You want it all to just collapse because you think everybody who doesn't think like you is a scary Trump Nazi fascist? Like, that's, we need to break out of this. It's infantile, childish thinking.
Well, not only that, who you think's gonna survive in a situation like that? You guys or the Duck Dynasty people?
Yeah.
'Cause my money's on those people.
Yeah.
You think you're going to inherit that kind of an earth, or do you think the people who know how to handle a gun and live off nutria are going to survive?
Yeah. They're going to be like, oh gosh, we can't get vegan food out in the front line.
Yeah, no, exactly.
All right, so we do have limited time, so let me kind of squeeze a couple questions together. All right, so I just because of the way it's handed down to us in Western media, really going back to the way the Soviet Union was represented, they, without explaining it, I think the impression is conveyed to Americans that Venezuela is some kind of a police state. But you talk in the book about how it was essentially a neoliberal democratic duopoly, corporate controlled, very similar to our own. And you also mention that they have militias, collectivos, that are empowered they're armed, and they actually prevented a U.S. mercenary-backed coup in 2020. So a country that democratically voted for a form of socialism, a very limited form, as you point out. They have private industry. They just nationalized the natural resources. Other than that, the state didn't take over. And they also empower citizens to go around armed. So this does not sound like a repressed population. When you have you don't arm a repressed population and let them go on their way. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is another really fascinating example of how the right-left labels in Venezuela don't translate into the U.S. lexicon. And that's because, yes, where in the U.S. you might have the left position is to be super anti-gun, a lot of the time reaction to a point of reaction, like being reactionary, anti-gun. In Venezuela, it's actually arming civilian militias that operate beyond the authority of the state has actually been central to their grassroots defense strategy. And the collectivos are always maligned in mainstream Western media as like Maduro's gangs, as if he controls these little like criminal groups that run around and operate on behalf of the state. But in reality, what I show in the book is that collectivos actually, their formation predates the Chavista revolution. They kind of formed as a result of the guerrilla warfare that the state was waging against progressive forces in the country throughout the 70s and 60s and 70s. Ultimately, they formed these unofficial groups that aren't connected to the military directly, of civilian groups that kind of monitor or control their own neighborhoods. And when Chavez came in, the government moved to kind of, since they couldn't just go in and take all the guns away, just allowed them to continue operating. And then also because those poor people benefited so much from the policies of Chavismo, it's not like an enforced policy of making them work in the interest of the state, but they tend to then fall on the side of wanting to defend their sovereign government. And as it turned out in 2021 or 20, it was 2020, May 2020, when this former U.S. Green Beret, Jordan Goudreau, sent two of his former teammates and a group of Venezuelan soldiers that they'd been training in Colombia for several months into Venezuela to capture or kill the president. They were actually stopped by a civilian fisherman militia, just some normal guys that were on patrol or out one morning and noticed this suspicious boat heading in from Colombia, and apprehended them. And that's how the police came in and ended up sabotaging or foiling that coup attempt. And yeah, it shows that, again, in a society, if this country were truly as authoritarian and evil as the Western media love to say, then the state would have a monopoly on the weapons, on the guns.
Right,
that's for sure. And so I think any country where the citizens have arms and the state doesn't have the sole control of a violent force in the country, then you're more free. That's my view, and Venezuela happens to fall in that category. So also something for a U.S. leftist to chew on.
So one final question, because now the country is in the hand of Chavez's handpicked successor, Nicolas Maduro. Now, you point out in the book how the American and Western press dismissed him as a bus driver, but he actually has a deep history of activism, long service in the government before he took over the government. His father had been an activist. What can you tell us about Maduro? Is Venezuela in good hands?
Well, he's definitely defied the odds, because ever since Chavez died, I think the United States expected Venezuela to fall immediately. They didn't believe that Chavismo could actually outlast one man, and it has. And Maduro, yes, he was an influential union organizer within the transportation workers union. And well, previously his father had resisted a military coup as a union leader throughout the 1950s. And then Maduro himself, as he rose the ranks of the union, had the chance to meet Chavez when Chavez was still in prison for leading the failed coup of 1992, when Chavez first tried through force, through the military coup, to establish his vision of the state. Chavez was jailed for 2 years, and Maduro really led the national movement to try to get, or was one of the most vocal spokespeople for the movement to get Chavez out of prison. Eventually that happened because there was so much public pressure. And then Chavez embarked on this national tour to meet with Venezuelans all around the country and see what it was that they wanted. He transformed that into a campaign, was elected to the presidency in 1998, and then initiated the Constituent Assembly to rewrite the country's constitution according to some of these new policies that he talked to people about during his travel, and including that's when they nationalized all of their natural resources. Maduro was actually elected to serve in that Constituent Assembly. He then went on to serve in the National Assembly, their version of the Congress, throughout the early years of Chavismo, was influential there. Eventually becomes very close confidant of Maduro, working as the foreign minister and then as vice president. And so Chavez really stressed
I just want to point out before you continue, because a lot of people probably don't realize this because of the kind of coverage we get. You point out in the book that during this period you're describing, extreme poverty in Venezuela was cut down by 50%, general poverty by 20%, college enrollment, higher education enrollment went from 700,000 to 2 million. So this doesn't sound like this hellish failed state that has been presented. I'm sorry to cut in. I just want
No,
people to understand that.
It's extremely important because Venezuela was booming. It seemed like it couldn't stop. And it was really only the collapse of the international oil market and the sanctions that undid that. Of course, I can't say that any government is perfect. It would be ridiculous to say that there's not mismanagement or corruption. Venezuelans don't deny this. They're working every day, some of them in the government, to prevent it, to crack down on it. They're always arresting people left and right, trying to address that issue. But overall, it's clear, and I think I demonstrate in the book, that it was outside forces that led to this economic collapse. And Maduro still survived that. And he came out on the other side and is credited with kind of turning the economy around, or overseeing the implementation of Chavez's his vision for Bolivarian diplomacy,
right,
building mutual relations with very powerful countries that 15, 20 years ago, Venezuela didn't even have. For example, the entire African continent, I show in the book. When Chavez took power, there were pretty much no direct ties. There were maybe a handful of countries that had actual relations with Venezuela on the continent. Since then, Chavez opened an embassy and Maduro opened an embassy in every single African state. And so that's an example of how that and why they survive, is because they see the world as open to them. They see other countries, even if they're ideologically not socialist or the exact same model as Venezuela, as potential partners. And so I think we can do the same thing. But when it comes to Maduro, he's running again in July. And as far as I'm aware, it looks like he will likely win another term. So I hope to be there for that election to get a better picture of what Venezuelan politics are like at the moment, because they're always so dramatic.
All right. Well, Anya, thank you so much for joining us today. Russ, you want to hold up the book one more time so we got it here?
Yes. And I also want to say the publishers have asked that you purchase this through their organization or books. No reason to give more money to Jeff Bezos. It is exactly what it sounds like. orbooks.com, right?
Yep.
orbooks.com, Corporate Coup, Venezuela, and the End of U.S. Empire. Anya Parampil, great to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, and I hope to talk to you guys again soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Anya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great one. Anya Parampil, everybody. Round of applause in the chat. That was great. Great talk. That was really interesting. That was great stuff.
That was very interesting.
Indeed. So thank you, Anya, for making the time. Thank you all for being here. We're behind on a couple things. We owe them a couple headbangs, so we'll do right hand first.
We should have done that with Anya. She would have been down.
Yeah, probably. That's true. All right, left hand. 1,954 in the YouTube chat, 1,068 over on Rumble. Thanks all for being here. We will get to Super Chats and Rumble Rants. A little bit of housekeeping here. We are doing a supporter stream tonight. So that's right, a supporter stream for Patreon, Substack, and Locals members tonight. That is at 8 p.m. Eastern. So you get a double dose of your favorite JOOs for those of you who give us just $5 a month. And so the best way to support the show is to go ahead and become a member. You get your name up in lights here on the show scroll. Jake has to update this list for Sunday because we've had some memberships, and then some of you guys don't see yourselves there. So we'll rectify that by Sunday when Jake is on again, because he does these for us on a weekly basis. But if you sign up for $5 a month, you get your name up in lights on the show scroll. You also get call-in access to our weekly post-show Q&As over on Rumble, and you get 2 supporter streams per month. So we got a show coming up tonight at 8 p.m. We will be doing some segments here. MSNBC actually did some rare journalism and did a pretty good segment on a Gaza university where the host actually used the G word. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to be doing a couple other segments there as well. And then we are going to be taking calls. So that's tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you have not gotten the email for that yet, it's because Rumble only allows us to schedule one live stream at a time. So I cannot create that link until we're done with this show. So you guys will get an email with an invite to both the call-in and the stream itself. pretty shortly after this program ends. I would say I should have it out by 6 Eastern, so you'll get it a couple hours in advance. So if you guys want to go and join the program, Patreon, Locals, Substack, the Locals, dudissidents.locals.com. If you're on Rumble now, that big bright red join button underneath the video player takes you to our Locals page where you can become a member and support the show. You guys are the backbone of the operation, and that's why we do these supporter shows for you. Does the new wonderful world have dental insurance? It better. It better.
It
Dr.
better.
12. Thank you.
Let me throw this up. There's somebody kindly
beautiful.
threw in the link.
Nice.
So that is the link. If you want to pick up Anya's book, that is where you go.
orbooks.com/catalog/corporate coup with a hyphen. Beautiful. Thank you for whoever put that link up. That was kind of you. Eric Rousseau, if I were in charge, I'd have debt jubilee for the poor working class while confiscating all land from the wealthy and corporations for reparations. Thank you, Eric Rousseau, member for 9 months. Derek P., great interview with Anya. She knows we have the best people. Let's take care of us, and that means all of us. Right on. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see here. The Judge, thanks for the $2. New leadership at the WEF. Does it matter? I would imagine not. I would imagine the whole point of the WEF is that it doesn't matter who's leading it. That'd be my guess. Just a guess there. Not an expert.
I don't think unless their dark master approves from the underworld, you get that gig.
Yeah, that seems like a really tough gig to just kind of work it. You don't exactly, work up from the mailroom to get that.
No.
Let's see. His Highness, this is a question for Anya. Can you recommend any polling outlet to find accurate polling on the upcoming Venezuelan presidential election? The ones on Wikipedia are all over the map. I will ask her. I will send her a DM and see if there's any way we can get an answer on that for you next time, because that is an interesting question. Because Maduro won with, I think, 56% of the vote. I mean, he won pretty handily, but I believe it was like 56-39. That was, 26 years ago. Let's see here. For Zen's sake, Taibbi wrote an anti-MMT article showcasing his complete MMT illiteracy. Please don't go down the same route just saying, it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. No one's ever seen anything like it.
People are saying Taibbi is completely ignorant about MMT.
Yeah,
if he understood MMT, he'd be very rich now.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing to see. It's a really horrible thing.
I've been so busy. I have not got. I saw it, but I haven't had a chance to read it. Look, I can't comment on whether he got it right or wrong. You know that we've always expressed a certain skepticism about it. I was gonna read the Kelton book, and then October 7th happened, so bigger fish to fry.
Yes, indeed. I'm just seeing how you're coming through on the stream. Yeah, you're coming through a little grainy on the stream too. It's not just me.
Am I?
Must be your internet. Yeah, a little bit. Ukraine freedom won't be stopped, says John Scott. Much love to the people of Ukraine. Ruthless criticism. The communist conception of family, however, is not the same. So family values cannot be equated to traditional liberal bourgeois families, and certainly not a nuclear family.
Listen, man. If you're talking about what Maduro just said, yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. They believe in fucking family. Now, if you're talking about other communist branches, who speaks for you guys? Because 10 communists have 10 different opinions. So there is no communist conception. There's 10
that's what I would
factions.
like to. That was going to be what I was going to say. I would like to get a follow up to see what you think that looks like for perhaps another $10. Thank you, Ruthless criticism.
They have sex like in Sleeper with a large vibrating egg.
Yeah, if you're so inclined. China Shell, thanks for the $2. Promote more multi-generational households. Thank you, China Shell.
See, I bet you and Ruthless Criticism would wind up fighting in a cage if you met.
Yeah, different conception of family there, right?
Yeah.
Sparky, thanks for the $10. Love Anya. I would spirit her away from Max, but don't want to upset him or risk interrupting both of their excellent work during these interesting times. Yes, they're a good team. You're not going to get in the way of anything, Sparky. Here's the link for Anya's book again. Thanks for bookmarking that, Russell. Appreciate that. Okay. Here we go. All right. Mark P. Thicko, love and appreciation from Sweden. You guys keep me sane. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that very much.
If only we could do the same for ourselves.
Yes, right. Exactly. All right, let's go to some Rumble action here. Let's see what we got over here on Rumble. We're nowhere near what Anya's proposing, says Ellen. We still promote a unipolar world organized around U.S. Border Patrol, Israel being our biggest BP partner. We already must speak of the U.S.-Israel border, the U.S.-Haiti border, the U.S.-Guatemala border, read Todd Miller, Empire of Borders. Okay, thank you, Ellen. Yes, no, I don't think, certainly not under the illusion that we are on our way there now. Definitely have work to do on that score. Okay, should we move on? We're going to take more Rumble rants and Super Chats as we go, but Russell was at a Cornel West rally yesterday. Cornel West rally, walking distance from his home.
Yeah. This is the nice thing about being in New York. I really am. My relationship with New York is very Godfather 3. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. I was really, before the channel took off, if this had not happened, I probably would have left New York. Like if this had not become like what I do. But if you're doing this, there's so much political happening, so many political happenings in New York. I have to turn things down. Like I wasn't able to go see the Greenwald Dershowitz thing the other night. I actually was invited by Keaton's brother, which is very nice of him.
That's right.
You just look at your email and, this rally is happening at the park by my house. Okay, sure, I'll cover it. So New York, I would argue, if you're covering politics, is the best city in the country you could be in. Better than DC because everything comes through New York. Right. In addition to politics. It's not just a politics town. Everything comes through here. And then you got the Trump rally tomorrow. It's just there is a lot to do here if this is your jam.
Yeah, so Russ was there. He got to interview Cornel a couple of different times. Not like a full interview. We got to ask him a couple different questions, seems like at different moments throughout the day there. And then you got to interview Norm Finkelstein, who was there as well. Chris Smalls was on the stage. Immortal Technique was on the stage.
He jetted. I would have tried to ask him a couple questions. He was out as soon as it ended. He might have been out before.
Oh, okay.
And Immortal Technique, he hung around a little bit, but my old ass wouldn't even know what to ask that dude. I really liked track 3 on your second album, bro. What would I say to him? But I thought I was in the wrong place because nobody showed up really. As you will see, I did a couple of crowd shots, but I got there like a half hour before the event. And really, I thought, I was like, hang on, man, Richard Rogers Theater, right? That's definitely the place. There's no other theater in Marcus Garvey Park. And nah, man, when I got there were like 20 people in the whole thing. There's a place that seats at least 300, at least. And then I realized, no, I am in the right place. Well,
as the rally went on, it seemed like there were probably maybe 60, 70 people there at peak. Maybe. Yeah. Hey, people don't have time to waste. At the end of the day, people don't have time to waste. And, Cornel has made it pretty clear that he's not really running for president. He's not really running to make a meaningful electoral impact. And especially after the experience of the Bernie campaign, people don't have time for that anymore. They're not going to put time into something that is a vanity campaign at best. So you see, people vote with their feet about things like this, and that's what you see. Look, this is his town. This is Cornel's town. This is New York. He teaches right by where that rally was. He teaches at the Union Theological Seminary.
if you can't pack a place in New York, where can you pack a place?
Yeah. So Russell did get some questions in with both Cornel and Norm Finkelstein. Now, Norm Finkelstein's interviews are never brief. So this goes about, 17 minutes or so. But this is a full cut. You'll get to see some of the speeches and some interviews.
Yeah, if you want to see the whole event, we streamed it on X, so you can see the whole thing. But these are select cuts from it.
All right, so we are going to mute up in full screen, and we'll see you guys in about 17 minutes. Enjoy. This is some on-the-ground reporting.
With Jordan Sheridan.
With a cameo from the OG. Yes, indeed. Indeed, yes, with a little cameo from Jordan Sheridan, who was there covering it as well. All right, we'll see you guys soon.
Discussing his back problems with Cornel.
Enjoy.
We had this in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I am from the show Due Dissonance.
It's a blessing to
Russell
see
Dobula.
you. How's your back and stuff going?
Doing good. I like your shirt. Physical therapy twice a week. But.
That's right. When you were running with the Greens, you had ballot access, and you were getting a lot of attacks from the media. You were getting attacked from every direction. Is that why you decided not to run with the Greens?
No, not at all. I was attacked the second day I decided to run for president, and I hadn't even got to the Greens yet. The first week I decided to run for president, they said I was the greatest threat to fascism. I said, no, I thought Trump and his people were the greatest threat to fascism. I was a black man going to be the greatest threat to fascism, and he only been running for 2 days. That's just typical double hypocrisy that operates. But no, I was blessed to work with the Greens for the time that I did. I had 17 states, and I decided it's best for me to be independent. I can speak more boldly. I can speak more true to what's inside of me, and I'm glad that I am running independent. And it's important. Salute you, my brother. Salute you, my brother. God bless you, man. Right on, right on. But what was I talking about? My dear brother come
You're
by.
talking about ballot access.
We're talking about ballot access, absolutely. And so we do, in fact. We're on the number 7 and 8. And we're gonna have a good 20 and 25 by the midsummer. We're on the board.
Are you afraid at all if Joe Biden loses that you'll get blamed? You'll get the Ralph Nader treatment?
I've been lied about all my life. I want to be true to what I'm called to do, and that is to love black people, to love poor people, to love working people, and to go down swinging like Muhammad Ali and Ella Fitzgerald. Don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
When I say Cornel, you say West. Cornel, West. Cornel, West. Cornel, West. Cornel, West. Let's live. Give a round of applause for yourselves for being here. And when I look at these politicians, a lot of them, who y'all know, will show up to your rallies, show up to your events, show up and take the photo ops, tweet about it, share it on Instagram, do all of that fun stuff. But don't put nothing in black and white and legislative that's gonna help us as a people have a better quality of life. And I realized that there ain't no cavalry coming for us. Let me tell you, I met your President Joe Biden. And let me tell you how that conversation went. I don't remember it. Yeah, I know. It's funny, but it's really not. Because this man is running the presidency. He's running the country. I don't really know who's making decisions in there, but I can tell you one thing for sure. When I left that White House that day, I felt empty. I felt like there's no hope. We got to do this ourselves. And that was 2 years ago, y'all. So as I sit here today and stand with y'all today, I'm gonna let you know, we need a president that's gonna represent the people. We need a president that's gonna show up every time, not just one time. We need a president that's gonna stand on business.
We have 3 people right now that are running for office that I can look at, Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden, and Dr. West, and each one of them claims to be a Christian. One of them is a con artist that can't name a single Bible passage. The other one is another con man and a genocide supporter. And then we have a person here a man of integrity who isn't afraid to call a genocide, isn't afraid to tell the system it's corrupt to its face. So you have to ask yourself honestly, if Jesus was here, who would he vote for? Who would he say is propagating his message correctly? So you know me, some of you know me, I rap about all kinds of stuff. You didn't expect me to come here and talk about God and religion, but I have to let you know, ladies and gentlemen, that we're manipulated every day by people who preach piety. And they sponsor the most horrific things behind closed doors. The horrors that we've seen in Gaza, that happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. There just wasn't social media like that back in 2001, 2006. And we didn't have the opportunity as a nation to be as disgusted and repulsed as everybody else. And we appreciate your voice, Dr. West, and we appreciate your courage and your leadership, because everybody else has left us out in the cold, and you stand there singularly, unafraid, unbowed, unbroken. And from the bottom of my heart, brother, we appreciate you. Thank you. My name is Immortal Technique, Harlem, New York.
Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, and China. These are terminal events waiting to happen, and President Biden is accelerating the move towards a terminal event waiting to happen. What Trump will do, I know, I can't predict. So it's a classic case of the fear of the known versus the fear of the unknown. But there's no doubt in my mind that on that particular front, namely the threat of nuclear war, he's a disaster. The administration is a disaster.
Cornel, make some noise!
We in here in Harlem, USA. And I met my dear sister outside. When I came in, she tears flowing down her face. She said, oh, they're taking over my neighborhood. This gentrification is just flowing every which way. What we gonna do? I said, my dear sister, you know we come from a folk who straighten our backs up no matter what the situation is and tell the truth and seek justice. And I intend to be faithful unto death. I don't care how popular or unpopular, I don't care what name you call me, anti-Semitic, anti-American, whatever the name is, I'll learn and I'll listen, I'll critically filter it, and then I'll look and say, Harriet Tubman, what do you have to say? Frederick Douglass, what do you have to say? Martin King, what do you have to say? Malcolm, what do you have to say? Ella Baker, what do you have to say? Fannie Lou Hamer, what do you have to say? And I ain't even got to the vanilla side of the struggle. But if we don't get ourselves together, if we don't get our souls together, if we don't get fortified enough to muster the courage to tell the truth, the courage to organize, the courage to sustain our struggle. Remembering what Martin King said when he said, I'd rather be dead than afraid. And Mary Ellen Pleasant said when she said, I'd rather be a corpse than a coward. That's what love warriors do. That's what you all have been doing. We just got North Carolina yesterday. Just got North Carolina yesterday. Oh yes, we on the move. I tell the story all the time. People come up to me and say, Brother West, I'm so glad to be your white ally. I said, my white what? Your white ally. I said, oh, well, let me tell you a story. There's a brother named Jerry who used to play the drums for Sly and the Family Stone. They were right here in this park in 1969, a few months after Woodstock. The Questlove just put in a film. And if you look at Sly, you saw Vanilla Brother playing the drum. And when Sly says, I want the drummer song, he didn't say, we're going to have a white ally play the drummer song. No, the white brother's in the band. He's in the band. He's not a white ally. When you're in the band, that's part of the solidarity. You already have earned your space. he hits the drummer song, and then Larry Graham hits the bass, then Sly hits the organ, and same is true with Miles Davis, with Bill Evans. He's a white brother on the piano. You think Miles gonna turn to Gil and say, we're gonna have a piano solo by the white ally? No, he's a white brother in the goddamn band. When you're in the band, you already earned the spot because you sacrifice, because you're willing to pay it all. That's what this campaign is about. Thank you all for being here. Stay strong. Stay strong. We are changing the world. We gonna continue to change the world. Nobody's gonna discourage us. Nobody's gonna try to beat us down. Brother Steph, thank you so much for your magnificent work, and all of you who are here. And Sister Corey, Lord have mercy, we thank God, dear Sister Corey, indeed. Lord, this is the baby born during the campaign.
Sorry, I'm looking at you too.
Keeps us fighting. You got the most beautiful smile, and the whole cosmos opens up.
Yes, right?
Benicio smile. Lord.
Dr. West,
yes.
with Joe Biden prosecuting Julian Assange, and we just had Chairman Yeshitela on our show. Is he a fascist?
Lord have mercy. Well, he certainly disregards the right of one of the most important journalists of our time, was my dear brother Julian Assange. There's no doubt about that. But does that have fascist implications? Absolutely. Absolutely, my brother.
All right, Norman, I was hoping to get a full interview with you, but since you got a ride going, let me just ask you. I know you get asked about the ICC ad infinitum. Why are you supporting Cornel for president?
Oh, I'm not being glib now. I believe in democracy. In my day, every left organization, they put up candidates during the electoral cycle, in particular the presidential cycle. If you go back to the 1960s, there was the Peace and Freedom Party, and there was the Freedom and Peace Party. And everybody had, Ben Spock ran for president. If my memory serves, Eldridge Cleaver ran for president. An election was seen as an opportunity to educate, to use the attention that's focused on a campaign, a presidential campaign, to educate. And it's a very strange moment we're in now, where people are saying he shouldn't even be allowed to speak. That's a betrayal, a vote for Trump. Listen, brace yourself. Democracy means people think for themselves. You can listen to Cornel, you can hear his arguments, and then come election day in November, you could decide still to vote for Biden. You could still decide that. But the idea of preempting him from the get-go to even speak during an electoral cycle, that to me is completely bizarre. It's people have lost any belief in democracy. It's all these elitists telling our country who they should and shouldn't be allowed to listen to. And I just find that not only appalling, but completely insane. I've never seen something like this. The Communist Party, it never expected to win an election, but always fielded candidates. In my day, it was Gus Hall and Angela Davis. I remember it well. Okay, they don't expect to win, but nobody ever said they shouldn't field candidates. The whole point was you use the electoral cycle or the presidential year in order to educate. And then, believe it or not, you're supposed to leave it to the people to decide. Once they've heard all the arguments on all sides, you can hear the argument that a vote for Dr. West is a vote for Trump, or a vote for Dr. West is a vote for fascism. You can hear that argument. You can hear Dr. West's reply. and then you decide for yourself. You let people weigh the arguments and decide for themselves. It's deeply elitist, it's deeply authoritarian to be saying that he shouldn't even run, that people shouldn't be allowed to listen to what he has to say. That to me is completely, as a radical Democrat, that is completely and totally unacceptable. It is pure totalitarianism, or at least authoritarianism. To silence a person's prerogative to run for office and letting the people decide whether or not they agree or disagree. And that's the reason I'm supporting him. I'm not saying vote for him in November. I don't know. We still have 6 months between now and November. I don't know what's going to happen. It's quite possible Biden won't be around. It's perfectly plausible he won't be around in November.
Well, now you said
not that the wish is father to the deed. I'm not saying that, but it's possible.
Now you said on stage that Biden would get us to fascism more slowly.
Yes,
now with the prosecution of Assange, Yeshitela, challenging the right for intelligence services to go after social media companies, is Joe Biden a fascist?
My view is the system is failing for 80% of our country. It's failing. And that the appeal from the right, as in Europe now, the appeal from the right will increase unless the system is set straight. And under Biden, it will not be set straight. About that, we already know. There may be improvements on the margins, and I'm not going to dispute that. There may be improvements on the margins, but it's not going to change the trajectory or lack of a trajectory for 80% of our country. And so if Biden comes into power, those same forces will keep accumulating, and maybe it'll be in 4 years, maybe it won't be now, but a serious, as in a lot of Europe now, a serious right-wing person will come into power. And if it starts happening under Biden, I do not believe he will not be able to reverse the process. He will not be able to stop the process. And judging by how he reacted to the assaults on academic freedom and freedom of speech the past few months, I don't think he will even make an effort to stop it. To hear what other people have to say. I find that completely ridiculous.
Well, but Norman, that hasn't been the left critique with Cornel. A lot of people were disappointed when he left the Green Party because they felt, this is the reason, they felt that he was afraid to get nadered, that he's going to get nadered, that if Biden loses and he runs as a Green and gets 4%, that's it. He's verboten for the rest of his life. That's the left critique. Where you're talking about the liberal issue.
That may be an argument. I can't speak to it, except to say it does not strike me as Dr. West's personality. It doesn't. That he would abandon the Green Party because he was afraid of getting enough votes that would cross the threshold. It doesn't sound like him. I could be wrong, and I acknowledge that. But that kind of calculation, it doesn't sound right. But people I've been hearing say Cornel West is an egomaniac because it's just about an ego trip on his part. I'm thinking to myself, is there anybody who's ever run for president who doesn't have a very large ego? That doesn't come with the turf. If you're running for president, you have a very large, Jimmy Carter, nice guy, humble, a large ego, So
Truman?
I don't know how you came up with Truman. Next you're going to say Gerald Ford.
There you have it. You're muted. It doesn't say you're muted, but your microphone is fucked up. Maybe that's
so as Keaton was saying before the stream, Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my stream. There's nothing wrong with the file or my phone. Like
Now you're coming through clear.
It's
it
clear on
buffered
my
in
end.
and out.
I don't know why. I don't know why.
I mean, it cleared up toward the end.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Weird. So yeah, man. It was interesting. It was kind of sad. It was kind of tragic. As you saw, nobody was really there. But really the big question, I asked it of Cornel, I asked it of Norm, and Norm gave an extremely honest answer that he doesn't think that Cornel would be that calculating, but he doesn't dismiss the possibility. I thought that was very forthcoming, given that clearly they're friends. But what do I think after? It's different personally interacting with people than it is watching them on a video. He clearly loves the kissing the babies part. That's why I dropped that in there. He clearly likes the glad handing, interacting with the people in the crowd part of politics. Obviously, as you would expect, he likes the speechifying part of politics. He just doesn't actually like the winning part of politics or the constructing a meaningful political project part of politics. So having, just my brief interactions or observations of him, does he seem like the kind of guy who might have gone to the Green Party and said, fuck these cosplaying white kids, I can't deal with this, I'm just going to go do my thing, it's a symbolic campaign anyway? Sure. I can't imagine that the pressure he was getting from the media, which you'll notice, in spite of the answer he gave, that basically he's still being persecuted. No, he isn't. They stopped talking about him as soon as he left the Green Party.
Yeah,
when he was running with the Green Party, every week it was child support, it was taxes. They gave him a taste of what he's going to get. So I can't imagine that's not part of it. Does he temperamentally also seem like somebody who is just completely unsuited to the actual work of being a politician and not just the fun part, kissing the baby and making the speech? Yeah, I don't think he wants to do anything more than that.
Yeah.
And obviously people understand that, and that's why nobody's there. Nobody has time for that.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, with the Greens, it would not have just been a symbolic campaign. The Greens, you start out with 17 states. You're on the ballot in 17 states on day one. So that's not a symbolic campaign, especially since they are on the ballot in a few very important swing states. Now you become mathematically a big factor in the race. And, I noticed, since we did the stream last night, because that stream that you live streamed to Twitter has quite a bit of views, as that got out there quite a bit. And some people are saying, are you going to go to a Jill Stein rally and comment on the crowd size? Look, I'm not against Jill Stein. I'm not about taking down Cornel West's campaign. The point about the reason I say I'm not inclined to throw whatever weight this show has underneath it behind a candidate is precisely to avoid those kinds of arguments. Because when you back a horse, now you have to back your horse and you have to tear down the other horse. And to me, it's not worth arguing over. Like there are meaningful things that we can argue about and get angry at each other over. Whether you're going to go in to a voting booth in November and cast a symbolic vote for Jill Stein or a symbolic vote for Cornel West is not worth arguing over. Right. Now, if Jill Stein gets some wind at her back, I mean, Kim Iverson told her that she's voting for her, which is, that is indicative of something. It's indicative that even people who, and I'm not going to say Kim Iverson, I don't really know how you would label her ideologically, but she spoke, very, very well of Jill Stein when she just interviewed her. And she just said, look, like, genocide is my red line. So whatever reservations I have about, some of what the Green Party stands for that I might disagree with, you're the only candidate with widespread ballot access who is against the mass murder of children. And so I have to place that above all else, and so I'm going to vote for you. That's what she said. And I respect that. If I vote, it will probably be for Jill Stein. Almost certainly. If I vote for president, it will almost certainly be for Jill Stein. And if she gets some real wind at her back and she looks like she's actually going to make a difference, then maybe we'll think about telling people to get involved in some way. That's still a huge question mark, because here's where it comes down for me. If I'm going to tell you to get involved in something, if I'm going to vouch for somebody or some campaign, I have to be confident that your investment of time, money, or resources is in good hands. So when Jose told us he's running, A, I know Jose. I think he's the real deal. B, when Jose told us he was going to go pound the pavement and get 10,000 signatures in 10 days, as I told him on this show last week, I was a little skeptical that he could do those kinds of numbers in 10 days. But I was not skeptical that he would get the signatures he needed. I was like, this kid's going to go out there and he's going to get the number of signatures he needed, and he will be on the ballot. Therefore, I felt totally comfortable recommending that all you guys get involved. And on our recommendation, people flew into New York from Ohio, from Kansas City, right? People spent real money and took real time out of their lives to back this campaign on my recommendation. So if I'm going to endorse somebody, if I'm going to recommend that you invest in something, I have to be damn sure that your investment is in good hands. I can't promise you an outcome, obviously, but I can tell you your investment is in good hands with someone who's going to take it seriously and run a serious and strategic campaign the best that they can. And in Jose's case, I trust him to do that. Do I trust that do I trust your time and money with the Greens? No, I do not. Do I trust your time and money with Cornel West? No, I do not. So that's what it comes down to. It's not about do I like them or do I not like them. I like Jill Stein, fine. But there's a difference between promoting someone or giving them credit where they deserve it and actually getting behind a campaign and making a formal endorsement. Because when I do that, I'm recommending you, I'm telling you guys to take time and money that you may not have and put it into a campaign. So that to me is the that is the sort of threshold that these candidates have to meet.
Well, as you all know, who watch the show regularly, I've been on a whole journey since what I've come to call the douchebag dialogues about you know, how we address each other, how we interact with each other, how we decide who's in, who's out. I do feel increasingly that YouTube and other platforms like YouTube are a panopticon. The algorithm causes us to make our own prison, where it encourages very, very vituperative language. It really encourages attack. It really encourages you know, barking at the moon. It really, really encourages that. And, you know, going and sitting through a conference of supposedly free speech advocates who would not say the name Julian Assange the entire fucking weekend really puts things in perspective. So looking at that gathering where everyone essentially has left positions about Gaza, about genocide, which I think is the defining issue of our moment. I think taking somebody like Cornel West and, you know, just ruling him as an untouchable forever now because he ran a stupid campaign and probably choked when he saw how much his self-interest would be affected by a real campaign. So what? Cornel West can never be involved in any left cause again. You can never, you know, and it's funny. A lot of people who feel that way are the same people who will say, no, Josh Hawley, I really liked what he said about that thing. I don't agree with him on other things, but somehow if it's somebody who is generally coded left, one step out of bounds, that's it. So you gotta remember who we're up against and what we're up against, and who and what we're up against is not Cornel West. Now, that having been said, yes, what Keaton said, we're not going to use our platform to encourage people to get involved in what's essentially an aimless vanity campaign where somebody wants to go through some of the motions of running for president without actually doing it. And as Finkelstein said, we're not in Cornel's heart. We're not in his confidence. I can't tell you why he dropped out of the Greens. I have my strong suspicions. It's probably a combination of factors. I think the factor of self-interest is an element of it. It's kind of beside the point. I mean, Chris Smalls, I didn't catch that part, but when Chris Smalls got up on the stage, he was kind of apologetic almost. I think he was embarrassed about the crowd size. He said, well, Cornel came when we were fighting for our union, so I'm gonna show up here. Like, he was almost, I wish I had caught that on tape. It was a very revealing moment. But that having been said, hey man, he did show up for that, apparently. Enough that Chris Smalls felt like he had to return the favor and show up there. So I very famously, I didn't get this on camera. Me and Norm had a little conversation about this, about the left eating itself. And I said, Norm, this goes way back. This is not new. This is a very famous thing of the left and its purity tests and attacking each other. I think that the fact that so much of our organizing and communication takes place within this context of this vicious algorithm that wants us to attack each other is exacerbating it. And hey, if you ever saw Network, which is, I hope to kind of develop a cultural dimension to this project, there's a play adaptation of it, which I would love to do. And I very often think of the character of the black female Marxist revolutionary who they wind up giving her basically a reality show where they're going to show the revolutionaries robbing banks. And eventually she gets so infected by the incentive structure of TV that this Maoist is yelling, God damn it, you got to get him off the air. My numbers are tanking. I think this space, our version of ratings is likes and clicks and views. And it does create a perverse incentive. So, hey, man, do I think Cornel West is like an evil guy with evil intention? No, man. I think he generally likes kissing the baby, and I think he's got a big ego. I think a lot of this is about his ego in ways that he's probably blind to. I think also, look, we all like Norm, and we all respect Norm, right? Norm wouldn't call Biden a fascist if you noticed. He also elided that question just like Cornel did. Now, is that generational? Is that they're older and they're just not going to go there? I mean, you look at younger people in the space, they wouldn't miss a beat, right? Is Joe Biden a fascist? Of course he is. That wouldn't be a hard one. So is that because they're older, they've been around longer, they have a more lesser of two evils view on things? Are they stuck in their historical moment where there really was a more meaningful choice between the two parties than there is now? I don't know. I can't answer that. But they both ducked that question, not just Cornel. So, yeah, I think his presidential campaign is a waste of time. We would never encourage anybody to get involved in it. I think he is a politician in the sense that he knows how to duck a question and he knows how to formulate an answer in a way that basically gets him around the sticky stuff. He was actually very good at that. If you look at how he answered my two questions, those were real politician's answers that he had prepared. So in that sense, he's a politician. But do I think this whole process on the left where we're so quick to rule out of bounds people who are on the left, but we're perfectly happy to work with people who are actually on the right who might agree with us on one or 2 points. It's funny. People on the left will very often accuse Democrats of that. How much they get weak in the knees when they can get along with Liz Cheney. Right. And a lot of the radical left is the same way, man. They want to hang with the right wingers, but they want to rule people who agree with them on 90% of things out of bounds. And I'm not saying that 10% is not important, and I'm not saying it's not important to confront people on those disagreements, but can we confront people without just, going to that extreme of like, oh, that's it, you're a scumbag. Do we have to go there with everybody? Like I said, after going to the douchebag dialogues, I've really rethought that.
Well, also, it's not. I mean, when you talk about, well, we can work with the right. Well, what does work with mean? Like no one's working with anybody on the internet, right? You're just talking about, will I give a rhetorical good word here or there, which we should do when we get the opportunity to. But yeah, I think you should treat everybody equally in that respect. So yeah, it's not about endorsing. It's not about ostracizing. It's just, you take these things as they come. All right, let's read
and I think, just one last point, and I was talking to Jose about this. This is why a lot of longtime activists eventually just abandon electoral politics and just go by the issues.
Right.
Because, yeah, man, one issue you're advocating for, you might want to work with Josh Hawley.
Exactly.
Next time you might want to work with AOC. So they don't want to get into that whole war of personalities that is electoral politics, because it actually makes them less effective as activists if they win off on this person that now they need to help make this thing happen in the community.
Right. It silos people. Yeah. Michael Castillo became a new member. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that. And you threw a $10 tip on there. Officially supporter. Fuck it anyway. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that very much. Ruthless Criticism. Thanks for the $20. There's a rich literature and history of communist theory and all its variations. No individual speaks for us, but any basic knowledge of that history would attest that family cannot be conceived as conservative notions. All right, but I would still like an example. I mean, we're not going to have time today of what you're talking about, but I would like an example so we could get into that, because that's a very important question. Because when you talk about governing how people live, people are obviously very sensitive about that, and people are very, very hesitant to turn power over to people who they think are going to dictate to them not just how their resources are allocated, right? I mean, that's reasonable, but how they live interpersonally, or even personally. Chris Bedford, thanks for the $5. Shout out to, but don't do it this time, Ruthless Criticism, because we're not going to have time, because we got to do one more segment, and then I got to prep a whole nother stream. So I don't want you to waste your money. Save it for next time, as they say. Shout out to my base Jews from an old Brooklyn Jew. Thank you, Chris Bedford. Appreciate that. The excellent YouTube geopolitical commentator, Sparky says, Garland Nixon, speculated that Iran may slow roll the crash investigation just in case it wasn't an accident in order to avoid war. Thank you, Sparky. Garland Nixon also does radio. His YouTube channel is one of the good ways to stay on the leading edge of geopolitics. Thanks, Sparky. Yep, like Garland Nixon quite a bit.
Your store don't have Garland Nixon, then your store could use some fixing.
There you go. Great show today. Thanks. See you June 9th night show. Perfect. Thank you, Palagano. Look forward to meeting you. Cool. Curious Cosmonaut, not a super chat, but a very important question. How do I get tickets for the Vega show? So you can get tickets for the Vega fundraiser by going to dodissidents.com/Vega fundraiser. All right. And he actually put up another one, which goes to his website. Let me put that one up as well. votevega.nyc/door. That is the tickets with his hyperlink. It takes you to the same place. None of these go to our website. They're just hyperlinks. So you can go to any of those places to get tickets, and we'll see you June 6th. Thank you very much. China shill, under no pretext should arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated by force if necessary. Karl Marx. Thank you. Here's a buck from a 14-point felon with a bachelor's in political science. Well, thank you, Topher. Appreciate that very much. That's very kind of you. So we are fighting for Ukrainian freedom. So when's the next election? Yes, when is the next election? Good question. Thank you, Topher. China shill, Engels elaborated on it. In the origin of the family, private property, and the state, there is a communist conception. Okay, thanks. I'd love to know. Already dead, 1967, the healing of the divorce between socialism and family is the death of the elites. Could the social magisterium be a light for the future? P.S. Who was the compact writer? What's his name? Sohrab Amari.
Yeah,
forget his name.
yeah, something like that. I invited him to come on. We haven't heard back. That doesn't always mean anything. We've had people on the show that we didn't hear back from for 2 weeks, and we assumed they blew us off. Then again, after what I did to Dawkins, man, like anybody who is in that network, we might just be like blacklisted.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Hey, guys, I'm not on the Patreon scroll. Join locals May 15th. Okay, so then we'll get you on. I just wrote you down. Thank you, miserable.
Hey, can I answer this from Jesse, our erstwhile moderator?
Sure.
Here? All right. So Russ upset he was so harsh with Bree, but she was dead wrong on Matt Taibbi and appears to believe he's a right winger. It was warranted criticism, even if it might have gone a little personal. Yes. Well, I mean, yes, it got too personal, but I haven't changed my mind about that. And if we have Bree on the show, we'll talk about it. But I'm not going to talk about it like she's everybody's enemy, right? I mean that's what I'm speaking against. Doesn't mean you can't disagree.
Right, of course. Corn Pop ran skag out of Marcus Garvey with the Pleasant Avenue crew, 67-68. Yes, so Biden's speech would have been there if he ever speaks at that park. That was Marcus Garvey Park there. Hardly Daylight joining you a little later today. I was watching the latest live Electronic Intifada update on YouTube. EI, an excellent channel for Gaza and West Bank news and updates. Thank you, Hardly Daylight. Appreciate that very much. All right, we'll take our final Super Chats and Rumble Rants after our final segment of the day. So, folks, the ICC announced yesterday, or I'm sorry, 2 days ago, rather. We covered it yesterday, but they announced it 2 days ago that they were seeking arrest warrants for Yoav Gallant and Benjamin Netanyahu. And today, Antony Blinken was disrupted in a Senate hearing. The purpose of that Senate hearing, in his mind, was to repudiate the ICC. But before he could make opening statements, some protesters got their say. So in a wide-ranging testimony before the Senate Tuesday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken denounced the chief prosecutor of the world's top war crimes court for seeking the arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and said that despite offering condolences for the death of Iran's president, it didn't change that leader's history of repression. Blinken, speaking to senators about the Biden administration's foreign affairs budget proposal, was repeatedly interrupted by protesters condemning U.S. policy towards its ally Israel and its war against Hamas in Gaza. The chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations and Senate Appropriations Committees halted the hearings at least 6 times while Blinken was delivering his opening statements, as demonstrators stood up to shout their opposition to the administration's position and accused him of being a war criminal and being responsible for genocide against the Palestinian people. A couple of these instances were, thankfully, of course, caught on tape. Here's one.
As I was saying, the People's Republic of China.
He is a war criminal. The blood of 40,000 people is on his hands. The blood of 40,000 Palestinians is on his hands. He is a war criminal. He is a war criminal. Blinken is a war criminal. The blood of 40,000 people is on his hands.
And back to the statement, but didn't last long. Here's another one.
Was 6 years old when Israelis killed her. His brother was 6 years old. Blinken, you will be remembered as the butcher of Gaza. You will be remembered for murdering innocent Palestinians.
Good for them for getting in there. Code Pink put that video out. Several silent protesters held up their hands stained with red paint or dye behind Blinken during his appearances. It's not the first time Code Pink protesters have done that. In his remarks and his responses to questions from senators, Blinken followed President Joe Biden and other administration officials in condemning the ICC's prosecutor for seeking arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over actions taken during their 7-month war in Gaza. Blinken repeated the position that the tribunal, which Israel and the U.S. do not recognize, does not have jurisdiction, and that it was extremely wrong-headed for the prosecutor to equate, once again, we covered this yesterday, they're not equating anything, they're issuing rulings, as they should, Israeli officials with Hamas leaders that he is also seeking to indict. So once they got the bad people out of there, the bad protesters, they were able to get along with the civil business of the hearing. So here is Antony Blinken basically expressing his disdain for the ICC and international law.
Yesterday, the ICC ruling yesterday, I'd like to get your view on it. I see it as a step in the wrong direction. That's going to make it more challenging for us to get the parties together. There's always been an understanding the ICC is there to deal with countries that don't have an independent judiciary. Israel has an independent judiciary. They did not give the Israelis an opportunity. We thought there was that opportunity going to take place this week. I want to get your assessment as to how you see the current situations in light of what just happened at the ICC, as to whether we are on track to continue to negotiate in regards to the hostages and pause in the hostilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, we see the effort to get a ceasefire and the release of hostages as the best, most effective way forward, both in getting hostages home, in creating an environment in which the people of Gaza can get more of the assistance they so desperately need, and a platform for which to build a more enduring solution that provides genuine security for Israel and meets the needs of the Palestinian people. There's been an extensive effort made in recent months to get that agreement.
Oh, there has?
We've come very, very close on a couple of occasions. Qatar, Egypt, others participating in the efforts to do.
You so close, and but it never happens. Never happens. How many ceasefire deals have we been? Yeah, how many times have we been told, "Oh, we got a deal on the table, we're getting close," and then it blows up because obviously Hamas will only agree to a permanent ceasefire, and Israel will not agree to a permanent ceasefire because their mission is to destroy all of Gaza. So there's never this idea that we've gotten close is nonsense. You've never been close. You've never been close because that's not Israel's objective. Israel's objective is to destroy Gaza. They're not going to stop until they do it.
Well, that's also a microcosm of the history of Israel.
Right.
They have spent the last 76 years pretending to be invested in a peace process and a two-state solution that they never had any intention of pursuing. Right. That's what they're doing. Yes, we'll do a ceasefire. Meanwhile, they're doing what they want to do. This has always been their way. Their ultimate objective has always been from the river to the sea, something that is in the Likud party charter, but strangely, they don't get called out for that.
Exactly. No, saying they were this close to securing a ceasefire deal is like thinking you almost won $1,000 a week for life because you had 2 lives on the win for life scratch-off card. No, they print 2 lives on a lot of cards so that you think you were this close, but you were never that close. Yeah. They purposely put 2 there instead of 3 so that you would think, next time, almost there.
That's how if you ever play the chess hustlers in Washington Square Park, or I'm sure anywhere in the world, they're so good. They let you almost win.
Right. They let you
so
almost
that you'll
win.
keep playing.
Yep. Exactly. They could knock you out in 5 moves if they wanted to.
Yep.
But they don't. Right. Because they have to keep you at the table.
This, we remain at it every single day. I think that there's still a possibility, but it's challenged by a number of events. And I have to say, yes, the extremely wrong-headed decision by the ICC prosecutor yesterday, the shameful equivalence implied between Hamas and the leadership of Israel, I think that only complicates the prospects for getting such an agreement.
Again, perverting the narrative here to make it look like the ICC was intent on making an equivalence between Hamas and Israel. He's saying that complicates the narrative. No, you're deliberately complicating the narrative by making this about an equivalence that's not there. The ICC issued, or sought, should I say, arrest warrants against Hamas and against Netanyahu because they found enough evidence to suggest that both were guilty of war crimes. That is all they did. That is not an equivalence. You are framing it that way in order to make it more complicated than it is, so you could say this complicates the narrative and gets in the way of negotiations. It does no such thing. It does no such thing. That is just a red herring that is meant to intentionally obfuscate the issue. Now, we're almost done.
We'll continue to forge ahead to do that. But that decision, as you said, on so many levels, is totally wrong-headed. And we'll be happy to work with Congress, with this committee, on an appropriate response.
Senator Risch.
On an appropriate response. An appropriate response. So, if we remember, those 12 Republican senators proposed sanctions against the ICC officials and their family members, barring them from ever entering this country if this arrest warrant came down. And I'm not the only person who interpreted that statement that way. Reuters reports Blinken says he'll work with U.S. Congress on potential ICC sanctions. So now we are going to have more bipartisan cooperations to attack the judges, basically. You know who attacks judges? Criminals.
Criminals.
Yeah.
The mafia.
The mafia.
Drug cartels.
Yes. They attack judges. They threaten judges. So here we are threatening the judges on the World Court.
Yeah, and this all ties back to our interview with Anya at the top of the show. We are real. I mean, we could have gone another hour with her. We are the baddies. You know, we are this criminal organization that has thrown out any pretense at morality that we might once have had. It's purely a might makes right proposition, and there's nothing else behind our policy at this point. When you're going to go after the same ICC whose integrity you lauded when they decided to prosecute Putin, what do you think? People don't notice that?
Right.
They don't notice your hypocrisy. Yeah, it's and as Anya pointed out, it looks like the game's almost over. We've pushed it too far. We've pushed it so far that, you know, Frank Herbert, one of the refrains he always came back to in the Dune series was the predator strengthens the prey. We've preyed on the world for so long that we've made the rest of the world strong.
Yes.
And now they are figuring out, as you will see in nature, how to defeat the predator. And they're doing it through organizations like BRICS, by setting up new alternative payment systems, new alternative systems of investment, de-dollarization. And this is what happens with an empire in its late stages. That arrogance sets in of a population that simply cannot imagine not having its prerogatives anymore.
Yes, indeed. Very well said. RBGH fam, left versus right is a false dichotomy. I prefer the prism of does the state really need to put people in a cage over that. Thank you, RBGH fam.
Like that.
SB says make sure to check Jimmy Dore today. Haas going to show what real communism is. Oh, does he have Haas on today? He good with Jose Vega. Try interviewing him. He's getting his own organization. I thought Jose's coming. I think maybe they're both coming on Jimmy today.
Jose's
I thought Jose was
on
on
today.
Jimmy's today. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you got a couple of good guests on the Jimmy Dore show today. Thank you for that, SB. Appreciate that. John Locke, well, Vosh said Biden's not a fascist, and he would know, being a great judge of cucks, or is he a great judge of cocks? Thank you. Thank you, John Locke. Hey, it's been a while, John Locke. Good to see you here again. Why will you throw the weight of the show behind Vega but not Stein? Well, I think I explained that. That's what I devoted a few minutes to explaining. I trust Jose to run a serious and strategic campaign. And notice he did what he said he was going to do. He said, volunteer, donate, I'm going to get on the ballot in 10 days. Went out, did just that. Boom. Right?
I mean, we would have Stein on, and actually, I'd like to. I don't think she'll come on any more than Cornel. Back when he was still talking to podcasters, he wouldn't come on our show.
Yeah, he wouldn't come on. Yeah.
So,
look, if it's
we
because
had
I don't
contact
feel
with his wife, right? Like
Yeah.
we made the connection. We got in touch with the right people.
Yeah, we
and
sent
for
the right
whatever
email to the
reason,
right place. Yep.
Would not come on. So
look, as I said, I trust your investment of time with Jose because I trusted that if we helped Jose get on the ballot, he would get on the ballot. He's on the ballot. Now we take it to the next level. I don't trust the Greens with that investment of time. They have not proven themselves to be a serious organization worthy of a mass movement getting behind it and investing in it. if she changes that in the next few months, I'd happily throw her. I'd happily say go work for it. Like if she can do it. But isn't that what politics is, right? Prove yourself worthy of our endorsement, and we'll give it to you. That's it.
And look, with Jose, when you look at what he's already done, look, that fucking kid's got balls like concrete. Yeah. Are we expecting him to defeat APAC financed Richie Torres? No. Are we expecting him to be a very good vehicle for a message that we need to grow and spread, and to become a focal point to bring people into a political process that could overturn that system eventually? Yeah, that's how I'm seeing it. Yeah. He's, and hey, man, I'm not an identity politics kind of a person, but at the end of the day, Jose Vega represents the South Bronx a lot better than Jill Stein represents the left. That's just a reality, man. Like, do we need to get behind this PMC old white lady? Really? Like, are we bringing new people that way? And that's not to say, hey, man, I'm not really PMC, but I'm an old white dude. Like, I'm not saying everything she says is nonsense, but you're talking about trying to build a political project here. Who you send out there matters. Who they speak to matters. Who they have access to matters. As we saw when we went to the South Bronx petitioning for Jose, he represents that district a lot better than Richie Torres does. Yeah. So there is a potential there to bring people in. I always say this, and it's not just about race, maybe not even primarily. It's also about class, man. It's also about class. I have always said this with the Steins, with the Green Party types. Where I come from, those people show up. That's like you might as well campaign for the other side if you're going to stand next to those people, because they are going to be such a turnoff to anyone with dirt under their fingernails that they're not helping. They're not helping. The best thing they could do to build a working class movement is get out of politics. So that's another reason from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the problem I have with that is that it's kind of unsolvable on her part, right? Like, if she brings people around her, that can represent that movement, then what is like to say that, well, because she is who she is and comes from her own background, I mean, I wouldn't cancel someone over that. I understand what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying to cancel her. I'm saying, do I feel like strategically there's anything to be gained from it? And it is partly because of who she is. Because she's not going to speak to people she's only going to preach to the choir. She's not going to be able to expand beyond that. Now, you look at someone like Jose, and hey, man, if Jose were, this PMC, I'd feel the same way. That's why I'm saying it's not just about identity. It's also about class. Jose knows what it is to live with his mom in an apartment with a ceiling falling down.
Right.
People find that much more relatable across the board, whatever your identity is, than someone like Stein. Now, you say, well, she can't help that. You're right. She's a reflection of the party that produced her, which is basically a lot of up their ass white people cosplaying revolutionary activists. And
well,
that is never going to speak to the kind of people you would need to actually create meaningful political change. And that is why, from my perspective, I would not direct people in that direction, because it's just not going to go anywhere. I see more potential in backing Jose Vega than in backing the Green Party.
Well, of course.
Because I'm thinking beyond today. I'm thinking years down the line. Where the Green Party was 20 years ago, it's where it's going to be 20 years from now. And frankly, I have come to believe, not necessarily with their collaboration, but I've come to believe that the Green Party is allowed to exist as a safety valve to suck in all the people who are inclined to go outside the system into a very ineffective party, rather than to build something that actually might be a threat.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with all that. And I think, for me, what it comes down to is the organization, the organization is just not there. It's not what it has to be. It has not proven itself. Now, if they can prove themselves serious and worth getting behind, even just to shake shit up, if they're getting, if she starts polling at 4 or 5 points in Michigan and Biden's down by 4 and she's up there causing hell, then yeah, as a strategic thing, yeah, absolutely, I could see myself.
I mean, strategically, sure, voting, but are we ever going to tell people, hey man, go work
fly
for the
out
Greens?
fly to Michigan and go door to door? Like I can't imagine.
That's what I'm
that.
talking about. I'm not talking about how you're going to vote on election day. I'm talking about us using our platform to say, hey, get behind the Greens. I don't see it for the reasons that I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't see it either. The right is only good on the trans issue. The left is correct on everything else. With Galloway, Hinkle, and Dorr, there's no point in being right-wing. Well, you know what I would say to that is that the right is really not good on the trans issue. I think
they go too far.
Right, they go too far. Like, they're not actually for trans
rights. They're literally anti-trans.
Right. So that's what I would say there.
Don't fucking don't confirm gender based on a 4-year-old say so. Don't bring fucking toddlers to drag strip shows, and let women have their own sports, their own prisons, and their own locker rooms. Beyond that, go live your fucking best life. I don't know what the hell's so complicated.
Right. Well, what's complicated is, and you probably got a big taste of this at Dissident Douchebag Festival, there's a lot of money to be made making mountains out of molehills, right? I mean, and I say this not because, look, you know how many trans people I've met since I moved out of New York? Okay. You know how many trans people I've encountered in 7 years living, not in the middle of Nebraska, in suburban New York? One. There's a trans cashier at my grocery store. One. Now, I'm not saying I'm glad I only met. Well, like I said, my cousin is a trans influencer.
That's only because
in LA.
You're not dating anymore.
Right, exactly. Yeah, my cousin's a trans influencer in LA, so it means nothing to me either way. The point is, look how much oxygen is created around an issue that affects
that's the intention.
Few people. That's the intention. Exactly. That's the intention. That's the intent. No, that's not to say, like, look, corruption is corruption. If there is an industry around medicalizing kids for profit, I'm not saying it's unimportant because it affects so few people. I'm saying look at the round the clock. There are people who have built careers talking about this.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
People have built there are entire industries around ginning up outrage around this during a genocide.
Right. I always well, and you can feel like I'm sure that the numbers on brands that are really built around that issue have plummeted since October 7th because there's more important shit to cover. There just is. And everybody knows that I've given this, I would argue, more coverage than any legitimately left commentator has given to that subject. But there's a fucking genocide going on. Like, yeah, man, if there's a major breaking story like the Cass report, I covered the Cass report.
Right.
Or WPATH, I covered that. But it's not, we don't cover that as regularly as we once did because there's just no room for that. Also, frankly, I feel like the tide is turning. So it's less of you need to win the argument. At this point, I feel like the argument has been won, and now it's just a mopping up operation.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get the cowbell out for Landrew. Oh, let's give our sound drop to Landrew. Landrew, thank you. That's very kind of you.
You don't get no ghetto cowbell, that guy, man.
Yeah, no. That's what I said. Get the cowbell out. Don't you have your cowbell?
I am Landrew. Landrew is dead.
There you go.
Defying Captain Kirk every week.
What would Marx think of us now? Fascism is here. Vote Jill Stein for peace. 50 state ballots. Thank you, Landrew. And like I said, if I vote, it almost certainly will be for Jill Stein. And if you send enough of those our way, it'll certainly be for Jill Stein. But,
not saying we're for sale or nothing, but you know our email. Let's talk. Let's set a price.
Yeah. Well, I want to answer your question since you gave us $100 for it. What would Marx think of us now? I had this conversation with Nick Cruz and a few other people who are, more committed Marxists. And I don't consider myself an anti-communist or an anti-Marxist by any stretch. I actually think Marx was a brilliant guy who got so much right. I mean, when you look at how he predicted the cycle of capitalism, it's pretty much spot on, right?
Yep.
I mean, you can't really argue with that. I believe that both capitalism and communism operate under the presumption that growth in industry and production and labor are good. And it's a question of how do we manage that growth.
Right.
Well, what happens when humanity, and not to get all Malthusian on everybody again, especially since we got to wrap soon, but what happens when the trajectory of humankind reaches the tipping point and now you start going down? Now you're not managing an incline, an increase in production, an increase in humanity, if you will, but now you're managing a decline. And when you're talking about managing a decline, that kind of flips the board.
Right.
So, I think Marx was exactly right. I mean, we're living through his what does he call it? Stage theory. We're living through that stage theory right now. So there's no question about that. But you also have to introduce into that equation apocalyptic weaponry, environmental degradation, right? And that complicates it a bit. All right, that's our show. Ooh, we got one more for $1. See, we don't discriminate. We'll take
$1 for $1.
We'll take Oh no, we got a couple more of these here. There's nothing honorable about Tony Blinken. That sign needs to be burned. Thank you, P. Walker. Yes, indeed. $1 Million Trooper Bluck Finken. Free Palestine. Thank you. You know West is a fraud when the Green Party is too serious for him. Thank you. Yes. Good turn of phrase there. All right, everybody, we got to get going because we have another show tonight. Patrons, paid Substackers, paid Locals members, you will get an email for the supporter stream within a couple hours. You'll get it at least an hour before the show, I promise. Can't promise it's before. I should be able to make this happen before I pick the kiddos up. If not, I'll do it after. But we will be on 8 o'clock, Rumble exclusively for paid members. So if you go to patreon.com/DoDissidents, DoDissidents.substack.com, or if you're watching on Rumble right now, you can join our Locals. Any of those 3 links takes you to become a member where you join the Cool Kids Club and you get a second show tonight. That's right. Double header, baby. Patreon, Substack, and Locals. Those are the 3 links. Head on over and we'll see you later. If you don't, we'll see you tomorrow morning.
What are you
9
doing?
a.m.
Tomorrow.
Thanks for the Octopus Murders recommendation. Worth watching. Thank you, Sherelle.
Right? That shit was crazy, man.
Midwestern Marks, Infrared, Palestine, Michigan event, May 24th. Oh, that's cool. Nice. Dig that. All right, everybody. We got to get out of here. We are on again in a few hours, and we are on again tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. for Morning Dew on YouTube and Rumble. Thank you guys very much for being here this afternoon with us. Thank you to our guest, Anya Parampil, for a great conversation. We will see you guys all later tonight or tomorrow morning. Until we see you again, be safe and be well.
Courage.
Please clap.